Today on Adversity Strength, we're joined by Alicia Zielinski Straub, a licensed professional counselor whose life took a dramatic turn when she walked away from a high-flying corporate career to confront a deeper, unexplainable emptiness she could no longer ignore. Alicia's journey into mental health field wasn't a strategic career choice, it was an awakening. Graduate school forced her inward in ways she never expected, reshaping how she understood herself, her relationships, the stories she had lived by for years. What she discovered is something she now helps her clients uncover. When we change internally, everything around us changes in response. Today, Alicia blends psychotherapy, somatic work, breath work, meditation to help people reconnect with their emotions, break long-standing behavioral patterns, and build an authentic relationship with themselves, one rooted in self-worth rather than performance or perfection. She speaks with rare honesty about the discomfort of real inner work, the fear and liberation of letting go of control, and the transformative power of becoming deeply self-aware. Beyond her clinical practice, she also leads transformational retreats that give people the space to reset, heal, and rebuild from the inside out. This conversation is about the courage to stop running, the power of emotional responsibility, and what becomes possible when we finally listen to what our inner world is trying to tell us. Alicia, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Lee. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure. Take us back to the beginning. Where did your journey start for you?
Well, for me, I started out working on Wall Street after college. I worked for my uncle who gave me this job, and it was in this like market making firm in the securities industry. And I was tasked with going to these big trading floors and sort of tapping people on the back and trying to sell this electronic communications network. And the interesting thing at the time was, I had this like crippling anxiety that I didn't realize was like fueling me. And so I was in the midst of one of the most like chaotic, stressful places, and it sort of like paved the way to begin to normalize, I would say, chaos and a lot of
Yeah.
dysfunction, So I started out working on Wall Street until the company was acquired, and then I moved into advertising sales in the IT industry on the reseller end, and then went out to the manufacturer end. And it was sort of a little bit of a continuation of that same chaotic, competitive result.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see your stress levels must be high. I mean, for me, obviously seeing the movies, anyone working in Wall Street probably going to be very stressed.
Yeah, and the interesting thing was, coming from a family, quote unquote, normal family. I went to Catholic school for 13 years. I was everything on paper that you needed to be as far as like a student or, someone involved, someone athletic and, president of this, involved with that. But, I never really realized until looking back later on in life how uncomfortable I was, and what the decisions I had made, trying to attain things that I was basically told or promised that this is what you need to do, and when you do it, you're going to be happy. This is what success means. And after checking off every box, I got to this place where, um, without any awareness at the time, it just felt something was really wrong, and I couldn't understand. Like, well, I did all this, and why does it feel empty? Empty, and something was just off, and I didn't really understand, the nature of what it was like for me in my life, in my body, in my home. If that makes
Yeah, yeah,
sense.
yeah, yeah. Tell us about the emptiness because, whether it's like myself, my own experiences, clients of mine, guests that's been on, so many people have like an experience of emptiness, like a void in their life there. What was going on with yourself there?
Well, for me, because it was quote unquote normal conditions that I grew up in, I couldn't define what the emptiness was. I think, oh, I know now, looking back, the emptiness was sort of the result of a traumatic experience. There was a disconnect, a hole or void for
Yeah,
me, because certain components that, I need, that we need, just weren't in place. Like at
Yeah.
a very basic level, like this idea of feeling seen or like loved or appreciated or a part of something, because there were just conditions that were in place that, didn't allow like my caregivers or their caregivers to feel relaxed enough or safe enough to be nurturing or compassionate or loving or what have you. And so the beginning of life with a dysregulated nervous system and like trying to work from that place of chaos, not knowing that it's chaos.
Yeah.
Yes, you never really experience anything other than chaos, and then moving through things and not feeling the joy or the excitement or, like whatever else may come of, or opportunities to learn and grow, because this chaos or this void caused such a disconnect from my emotional or even physical body, because you just press through things,
Yeah.
that it was a never ending black hole of trying to seek something or feel
Yeah.
something that would never be attained because of this disconnection presenting in the form of emptiness, which is the essence of trauma,
Yeah.
that disconnect. Like
Take it back.
it's a culmination of things. I really think, you have your large scale traumas, like, which had happened later on in life. And then, there's the smaller scale,
Yeah.
repeated, consistent exposure to
Definitely.
or
Yeah.
neglect of,
Yeah.
and for me, I think there were certain things that needed to be in place that just weren't. And, as we are developing as little humans, the mind, brain's still forming cognitively. And so we're in this very concrete world trying to make sense of things in our own little rendition of it.
Yeah.
And so, like, well, if I'm so uncomfortable, there must be something wrong with me because I'm being told, oh, you're fine,
Yeah.
or there's nothing to cry about. Stuff along the like that, being not intentionally somewhat like dismissed or made to feel
Yeah.
shamed or criticized, versus like loved and supported in a softer way. It was just very hard, very hard. And I
Yeah.
think that when we develop in those circumstances, we start to really internalize this belief that there's something wrong with me, because we're unable to discern that there are conditions in the environment impacting how we feel and how we develop.
Yeah. Without doubt. And the problem is that I explain to clients that it doesn't take a lot to suffer a trauma. It's a lot less than what people think. And the problem that you get is that it becomes normalized. Some of the things that you see and hear that people have been through, and they didn't realize that that was a problem. So even if it's like something small, over time, it's going to have that effect. You're going to get that void, and you might have the most caring people around there, but they've not seen where the issues come from, so you can't understand it, and you might not know what to say or do. Oh, you just get on with it, which obviously is the worst thing you can do. And then you just feel that you're the problem there. With yourself, when did you think something here is not right? This cannot be right. When was that?
Well, there were like lots of little moments in life, but the real culminating factor was back in 2012 here on the East Coast. We had that superstorm Sandy that came. I was living here on the Jersey Shore. Everything was just destroyed. And, after like losing a job in IT sales, I took time off, that summer, and decided after haphazardly or serendipitously running into someone, was redirected into mental health counseling. Probably because there was a part of me deep down inside that knew I needed help. But at that point, it was either going to be getting a master's degree or probably entering into some like substance abuse facility. So, I went and I equipped myself, but not working and getting a six-figure salary, cleaning houses or cleaning boats, organizing people's anything I could do legally to make money, not having health insurance, living below the poverty level, but pretending everything was fine. It was a beautiful experience because it taught me the difference between needs and wants versus requirements or luxuries, but it was taxing. So after that period of time and I had graduated, the mental health field was not like it was now. It was very difficult to find a job. So I had all these student loans. I had, no health insurance. I had, no direction, and I was drawing from the last of my reserves. And then the storm hit and destroyed everything. And it wasn't so much the nature of the actual storm or the destruction of everything, which was sort of like a twilight zone here. It was that the mechanisms that I had in place, whether it were certain friendships or activities or the community, were like ways that I was using as outlets to sort of contain, what was in need of being healed. And when all that went away, everything surfaced to the top, and it was presenting in tremendous irrationality, like overreactivity. I mean, real, like what felt every day like a fear for my life. Like everything was threatening. But at the time, because even though I went through a mental health counseling program, I'm a licensed professional counselor, I was always focused on this cognitive aspect, right? I had no idea that I was just in a dysregulated nervous system state. I had no idea about the neuroscience of things or the somatic aspect or the trauma informed literature, because my path of healing and helping others was my path. And until one thing led to the other, I didn't really realize, like, that we all have to contend with nervous system regulation or dysregulation. And it's something very much within our capacity to develop these skills to regulate, and the awareness to know when we're moving in and out of different states versus believing whatever's really happening is the problem versus working with a dysregulated
Yeah.
nervous system.
And how long had you been studying for that for? How long would you be
It's been
studying?
about 3 years since I've like dove
Yeah.
into the somatic aspects, and that was all triggered after going on this retreat, which was like a life changing experience. Like
Yeah. Tell us about the retreat. Yeah. Tell
so
us about
I
the
really
retreat, because a lot of people don't
so
know about retreats. And so a lot of people are like, what goes on at a retreat there? So, different
so
experiences. So what happened? Yeah.
back in like before the pandemic, I had tried to take this modern dance class because I thought, well, it's a way, something inside of me, like, thought it might be fun, thought it might be healing, and I really fell in love with the instructor. And, I found a place where it felt comfortable, like it just felt like I could be myself. And then COVID happened. So we come through COVID, and I see this instructor marketing this retreat to Costa Rica. And I'd always wanted to go to Costa Rica. And, because I knew this woman and I trusted her and her energy, it really sparked an interest. And gratefully, well, what had happened was when I was like, oh, I got all excited. And then well, you can't do that. You do it. You don't have money, you don't have time. But I was aware of like, thought pattern of not feeling worthy enough or deserving enough. I'm like, well, wait a second. So I really questioned it, and I, had my conversations to see if it was feasible or feasible. As it turned out, even though I was deathly afraid because of every other form of anxiety, if I had to leave my husband or leave my home, or, that I was going to go, and I was going to go by myself, and I was going to face this fear and put it behind me. And so I went, and I didn't realize what was going to happen when I was there, because at the time I really thought I was like, making tremendous progress and grounded and doing well. But, I stepped into this container where, there was no judgment. There was no criticism. There was no shaming. There was no competition. It was like warm, and it felt like safe, and it felt like, I really tapped into what true sense of belonging is about, like when you can really, drop everything, drop the masks, and like, just experience what it's like to be amongst people who care in a place where, you're just in nature and the senses. It was like an awakening, like, and I awakened to senses and to feelings that unbeknownst to me I had disconnected from, which is another like level of like the trauma. So it started to make sense to me that like, whoa, like even though I was like in my mind and my thoughts were calmer, and I had learned and healed, blah, blah, blah. But there was still stuff that was deeply ingrained and fragmented within my body that began to release as a result of the different practices, mindfulness based that went on that sort of like unlocked, what had been stored implicitly or unconsciously inside.
Yeah.
I stepped away and it just like everything felt different. And so like after I came home, it wasn't like, it wasn't like, oh, poor me, it's over, it's done with. It was like, all right, this is where the rubber's going to hit the road. Like this is a very important aspect of treatment that I didn't understand was so important, probably the most important aspect of treatment. And so I just set on this quest to like immerse myself in learning and studying about this so that I can bring this into practice both in the office and then out into these containers and in retreat format to really allow people to get a taste of what's down there. Like I didn't know this was down there, and it was like, and so when I tapped into what's down there, suddenly that hole went away. The void went away.
The void
Emptiness,
went.
yeah. And it was like a reconnection to the self that had been like buried under layers of experiencing, efforting, perfectionism, trying to prove, trying to explain, trying to do all this stuff and working from the outside in versus having like the space and the conditions in place to really begin to understand what it's like to work from the inside out. And it's not the inside of the mind. I mean, the mind's really important, but if we're not in a grounded, regulated state and we're trying to like be rational and logical and connect with other people, yet we're like in fight or flight, like that just can't happen because we're offline with the prefrontal cortex, right? So in order for us to step in and lead in and talk to each other or to work through our problems, like we need to be grounded in that parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system state. But the challenge that we're presented with, I believe, collectively, is like everyone's running around for the most part in a hypervigilant fight or flight state, and like me, don't realize it and thinking and believing that everything that's happening in front of them is true, as opposed to understanding they're looking through the narrow lens of threat and reacting.
Yeah, yeah. That we're so used to just running around, not stopping to thinking about how we're feeling, just ignoring our thoughts. I'm a big fan of listening to what your body says. A massive fan of that, and people ignore it. We've all done it there as well. So you originally went to the retreat just to what, for a break, just to get some energy back originally?
Well, yeah, it sounded good, but I just really wanted to go to Costa Rica. I was just like, no, I always wanted to go, and I like this girl's energy, and I'm going to go by myself. My husband does things, and he is an adventurer, and like, and I want to be an adventurer, but I had no idea what was waiting, and I'm really grateful that I had enough awareness to realize like that sinking feeling that came subsequent to the initial spark of going. And I was like, no, I can't. How many times like we don't pay attention to that intuition, and we drop into doubt or fear or lack of worthiness, and we make
Always.
decisions from the place. And so I think when we put some of these more of these somatic practices in place to come into present moment awareness, like we can see these things and we can pause before proceeding and really make choices. Like I think that some of us, we don't realize we have choice because we're running on autopilot, which is important because if we had to think about how to engage fine motor skills to brush our teeth in the morning, we would never get out of the house. So it's important where it's important, but it's prohibitive in many other ways.
Yeah, because we're so used to doing things on habit and routine without even questioning it. And sometimes we need to take an overhaul and have a look about what we're doing. Is this benefiting us? Why are we doing these things? Is this out of habit? Is it necessity? Or why do we do these things? And it sounds like you had like the best ever reset you could have had without even realizing it when you were going there. And then you've kind of come back as almost as a new person and a bit of an epiphany moment for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it really changed everything, and it continues to change everything. It wasn't so much the retreat, but the opportunity to like connect to the core. Like there's got to be conditions in place. When you think about a typical yoga class, and now I'm a yoga instructor, breath work, meditation, all that stuff. But like shavasana, at the end of every yoga class, there's this corpse pose, and it's like the ultimate relaxation if you have a good teacher to really drop into non-sleep rest. It's restorative, where like the energy and everything's just integrating in a new way. But to lie down vulnerably, to lie down vulnerably in a group of people in public and to feel like safe, you can see people squirming around. Like, even though it's like the easiest posture, you're just lying there. It's the most difficult one because you have to relax enough to feel safe enough to let go. And so, whether it's
Yeah.
retreats or, other containers that allow someone to feel safe enough that they can loosen up with the contraction. They can relax, they can release, they can open, they can lighten, those are nervous system states. And, depending upon our experiences, and they vary for each of us, like it's not an easy thing to do to be able to relax. But if we can't relax and release to open, we are holding a lot inside of us that now takes up the space of what we're really trying to achieve. And it feels tight and yet empty.
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, it's like you're in that almost like that frozen sort of fight or flight where you just can't switch off, especially if you've been through bad experiences there. You're on the the reptilian part of the brain. You're ready to like fight, flight, form, whatever it might be. So to be able to relax is a big achievement. When you were on the retreat, what was the moment you felt that you were able to fully actually switch off and relax and you felt like safe and secure and you could just like close your eyes and get the most out of it?
Well, it was designed so that from the very beginning that happened, but there was one particular moment, I decided to go on my own little personal exploration. I went down into these, like it what felt like an abyss, these little narrow path, and these now going down into some like abyss. And there's the roots of the tree, and like, thinking where I'm going, I'm like, well, it can't be that dangerous. I just like to disclose I have a history of like, high adrenaline taking, actives. I think my amygdala, whereas sometimes it was very sensitive and other times it wasn't operating the way it probably should have been. But, so I'm like going down here, and I discovered, down this winding path, this waterfall that was so beautiful, like deep in the midst of the jungle. And I sat there and I was just like, I'm sitting there like quietly, which was weird for me, for my mind to be quiet and my body to feel comfortable and
Yeah.
relaxed. And as I was sitting there, like something happened, something I can't explain it. It's just something shifted, and it was like it just became like light. I couldn't explain it. So I sat there for a little while, and I marched back up, got back together with everybody to go on the next excursion, and we're in the car, and, everybody's talking about their day. And I had mentioned how I found this waterfall. And I said, not to sound weird or anything, but I think something just happened. And they're like, oh, that's like the ancient, it's like a vortex or somewhat. At the time I thought all that was like a little hokey, and I never really believed in it. And I was out at Sedona, and I was out of these places, like trying to feel the energy of the vortex. But it was just so strange that in this very personal, private moment where I was alone by myself, having no idea where I was even going, that something led me to a place where I sat still and just experienced a profound shift that it's just never been the same.
Do you think if you go back to the crazy stress filled days of Wall Street, and then suddenly it's the old story of being at one with nature, the difference between the two, and how many times you hear people say, I was at one with nature. Maybe that was the moment that you could actually switch. And we go back to where we originated from there as well. And we've got a connection with nature, and it's an amazing, beautiful surrounding. And it's almost like that has give you the the reset, something you could
Yeah,
have got
that
200,000
and
years ago.
yeah, and there was like, it was an environment where the food is all plant-based food, which was just scrumptious, so I wasn't putting, you know, stuff in my body that wasn't good. There was like,
Process.
yeah, no processed food, no sugars, no, like there's no wine, and just stuff that's like everything was just nourishing. But it's interesting when you
Yeah.
contrast the two, like life beforehand, which was chaotic, and life post chaos. I have like this funny experience that happens within the past 6 months. So like I had this dress, I don't, that I've worn like, I don't know, at least 500 times. It's like at least 8 years old. And, it's running to the grocery store. So I put it on. I don't know if male clothing has this, but in female clothing, sometimes there's these like little ribbon like strings that you can put on a hanger to sort of hang it so the sleeves don't fall off as a tank dress. And like they're annoying, they stick out and you gotta keep pushing them back. And I put the dress on and I realized this is like annoying. And I walked into the bathroom, grabbed the scissors, and I cut the string. And then I stopped and I asked myself, why has it taken 8 years and 500 times of wearing this dress to cut off the string? And it really bothered me. So of course, like I'm working now with another clinician who incorporates somatics into treatment more so than talk, so I can learn how to, get more skillful with my own clients. And I was sharing with her the story, and she's very simply said, because you can no longer tolerate chaos. And like tears just welled up in my eyes, and I was so like grateful, for the chaos and for where the chaos led me as a therapist, and for this place of like peace and clarity and contentment and like, joy, this new state of being. But the bottom line is like that profound moment at the waterfall, allowed me to understand the difference between life with chaos and life without, because it was contrast. It was contrast. I think it's very difficult for us to really appreciate what we're going through until we're not going through. I mean, we know we're going through something, but when we're really not going through it anymore, and you're like, holy, like what? It's like found.
How do you deal with chaos now when chaos tries to come into your life now, everyday life? How do you deal with that?
Well, the healing journey, I talk about boundaries, bound is such a buzzword, but it's true. Like, you think about, I think about that experience as that retreat as a container. Like now more of a container for something collective and personal. But when we set boundaries, like we need a container, like we need some type of container that allows the space for us to go inward, to feel these things, to allow these things, to sort through these, to discern, to tend to have compassion, whatever. But when we don't have boundaries and everything's coming in and like we're going out, like where do I begin and end? And where do you begin and end? And then everything's blurred together. Like it's just no beginning, middle, or end, which is another characteristic of trauma. Also, like everything's hard. That's another characteristic of trauma. When we set boundaries and we learn to get comfortable with them and really appreciate why they're so important, so that we can understand our authentic self and connect to that. And then from that space of connecting authentically with ourselves, we can connect authentically with others and actually have like meaningful, fruitful discussion that leads to some place that feels nice. So the boundaries are very important, in preventing or promoting different aspects of life.
Yeah, that's great. It really makes sense what you're saying there as well. And sometimes it takes people a long while to get to that place, and they have to put a lot of work in to get there as well. How do you deal with this with your clients? Because you're going to have clients that come to you that's been through or are going through what you've been through. How do you speak to them and get them to deal with it?
Well, I really feel like the first session, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I probably talk more than the client, because it's the psychoeducational piece. Until we
Yeah.
understand who we are by design, we're going to assume that there's something wrong with us or someone else. When in actuality, there are conditions impacting nervous system regulation or dysregulation. And I think when we can understand that and take more of a like mindfulness approach where we're like not judging, which is hard for me, having this like, staunch Catholic backgrounds. It's one way or the highway, very rigid. You to open up into this psychological flexibility, and other types of flexibility, but to really provide the education and to like be mindful to look at things without the judgment. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's not good, it's not bad. It's what's happening. But sometimes it can be really hard to be with what's happening. So we want to like lean in, not like try to back away with that spirit of curiosity and compassion. Like, what is this? What is this? And like really be with the situation and three simple words. This makes sense, as opposed to what is wrong. This makes sense. Of course I'm going to be feeling this way. And when we use
Yeah.
compassion, it's like being cuddled as a child. It's like it's warming, it's comforting, it's nurturing. And so the nervous system, it relaxes out of that fight or flight, or mobilizes out of freeze or fawn, into like a state of balance where we can ground and feel safe. And then from that place, begin to explore and talk and do whatever, we're going to do. But if we miss that boat, if we miss that foundational step, which I didn't know I was missing for so long until I discovered by the grace of God, like how important this is. You're building on a house of cards.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things, especially with clients, is that they're worried about being judged. That's one of the first things there. And also for me, where I'm not a big fan of person-centered, where the client's meant to be the expert and know all the answers. Most of my clients that's come to me don't know the answers. They want to get answers. And for me personally, if you find out the root cause and you start finding answers of what's causing that person's pain, for me, it's 80% problem solved, and then 20% you can work on the rest. The difference it makes when somebody goes, that makes sense, I now know where that's come from. I've had a lifetime of pain and it's caused by this. I know from personal experience, when my therapist has explained something to me and suddenly, most of the time the answer's in front of you, but you're never going to see it. But then when you finally do, you're like, oh, that makes sense. And you can almost feel like a weight's lifted, just
Oh,
disappears literally when they find that. So, so I think it's a real major thing when you're speaking to clients, that you can help them find their answers.
sure. And you're also describing, Lee, just like joining. We need to be able to join with one another, like, and that's like sounds so simple, but joining is like I'm willing and I want to understand your subjective experience. I want to hear what you
Yeah.
have to say. It's not about me, right? It's not about, well, you're right or I'm wrong, or this power struggle. It's like, okay, here we are at this time in our lives. And there's billions of us all over the planet. Every one of us are compilation of our experiences that have added up from birth until now, that have shaped the way we perceive and interpret information. Yet we think we're on the same page. It's fascinating to really embrace this concept, to really appreciate that it's going to be different. We're not going to understand each other. We're coming from this place of a culmination of
Yeah.
experiences. And you know what? I want to hear what
Yeah.
yours were about. I care enough about
Yeah.
you to see you. I want to get to know you. It causes, like, it's like neuroceptivity, nervous system to nervous system. It's safe. There's no threat. There's no competition. It's an appreciation of what is, a valuing of those differences.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when a client realizes that, especially when they're new to therapy and they feel comfortable and they know that they're going to get a good positive reaction from the therapist, it makes such a difference to them to be able to open up. And then they often open up far more than they even realized that they could. And that's when you start getting your results. And always, as I always say, you have to have that vibe. You have to have that connection with your therapist. I always say that at the start with a new
Yeah.
client straight away. You have to have a vibe of connection. It's like a first date. If you haven't got someone,
Yeah.
you might as well just finish your drink and go, So all of that with a combination, and you got obviously a therapist that is empathetic and knows their stuff, that they're going to help make a big difference to that person's life there, and that person is a good chance they can have that epiphany moment like what you did with the waterfall, but just in a one to one with yourself.
Yeah. Sometimes when I see new clients, I really have to be careful that I'm not like smiling because I'm like so excited for, the
Getting
propensity,
started.
but they look like a deer in headlights, like, understandably, it's scary. It's not easy to come into a room you've never been in and talk to a stranger, if someone you don't even know. But, I'm sure you do the same. Meeting in at the end, well, how you feel? What's this like? What can you take away from this?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
it's always like they're really pleasantly surprised about like how comfortable and how nice it felt, right? Because we
yeah,
put as therapists, we understand the conditions that are necessary. Like there are conditions that are necessary to have in place for someone to feel safe enough and to relax enough to open up and to release this. And from that point of release, all the garbage is gone. We can connect to that core, which then fills that space up with what's supposed to be there, and it's not emptying.
yeah. Yeah, for me, it's having that connection, having the client recognize this person, this therapist is here for me. They actually understand. They actually get where I'm coming from. They're not judging me. They're letting me talk. And I say it all the time. Having a therapist, it's a different conversation. You can't have it with anybody else. And I'll break it down for people at the start. I said, at the end of the day, this is the first time you've spoke to me. You're having a conversation with me that you probably wouldn't even speak to your partner about. I'm a complete stranger, predominantly online or whatever, and yet you're able to do it, and you've got a connection, and you've built up a trust and a relationship there. So there's the wonders of therapy there as well, and that's why you get the results there, because you can't get the same results for therapists as with like friends and family than you do as a therapist there. And when they kind of realize that they're on a different journey to what they imagine, especially when it's their first time in therapy, they build confidence, they build trust, and they've come. And I clear, I said, what's going on for you? They're like, oh, my head, I've got a million things, I don't know where to start. And I say it's easy. Whatever's sticking out, whatever you feel important, start with that. Don't worry, the rest will take care of itself. We get there. And over time, it'll settle down, and it won't be like, should I talk about this? Should I talk about it? It'll be like, yeah, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about that. And it seems to just relax them and give them some confidence as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was just thinking, it's like again, like what's like that? People come in and they think there's got to be this timeline of this and that, and maybe that's helpful for some. But the way I feel, like what you just shared, is in that moment, whatever's happening is happening, and whatever hasn't been healed or resolved is gonna keep coming up eventually. So it's just if you start from where you are and let it lead, it's gonna lead where it needs to lead, and so we don't have to over. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I say to people that I get clients that want to tell me something. They want to share something, but their brain's not at that place to do it. So I'm like, don't do it. I said, right, don't do it if you're feeling that you're having to force it. I said it won't work. And don't do it if you think that's what I want you to talk about. It won't work. You talk about it when you're ready. I said, talk about someone else. It might be the next step to where you need to be to get to where you want to talk to. And then it's just the next step along. And suddenly it's not like a big jump there. So just take your time. You'll get there. And if your brain doesn't want to talk about it, don't worry about it. There's other things that we can focus on. So when they feel that there's no pressure on them, that builds confidence up. And it's amazing how quick they're able to come back in a week or two, or a few weeks, to go, actually, gently, I really want to talk about that now. And again, the trust is there, the confidence is there, and they've been able to process and deal with other things along the way to get to that point. So that makes a really big difference.
Yeah, and in line with that, at least for me in my own personal process, and now it's like happening in like professionally, to really grasp this, as someone that's, we do mental time travel, right? We're always thinking so far ahead or going into the past. Like it's very hard unless there's consistent practices in place to live presently, to be in the experience. So like you're talking about trust and, allowing, and but it's also the client or the person, the ability to sort of trust in the process unfolding. When we're in the experience, not thinking ahead, trying to get to the results or worrying about, but when we have to go through things
Yeah.
experientially so that we can establish this sense that like it's unfolding as it should. That's not a knowing. That's like an experience that happens in the body that allows like the nervous system to recalibrate that, I can trust in myself because I'm trusting in you and you're allowing for this experience. I am learning to trust in the process and in my organic unfolding of the experience, not hurried, not forced, just unfolding naturally.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, 'cause I mean, obviously, not all clients. Some people want. Sometimes they want instant results. It's not realistic, and you have to explain it to them. But in general, I find clients just want to be guided. How long is it going to take? And sometimes you go, "Oh, do you know what? I reckon you need a few sessions. Here's why." Or there's no real time scale. Here's the reasons as to why. And I just, more progress is still progress. Look where you will be in 6 months' time compared to where you were, and you'll probably settle for that. So there's lots of ways that I can find to get them to think in the right way and feel confident that they're going in the right direction. I know when I first started, I had a lot of trauma therapy, and I still do. But after a few sessions, I mean, my first the two therapists I've had have both been brilliant, but my first therapist, she was amazing, and there's so much that was coming up for me that I'd never, they've been blocked out and ignored, and it's all coming up, and I just felt different. And I knew I was on the right path. I had 100% confidence in her. Whatever she would have told me to do, I would have just done it without even thinking about it because I had so much faith in her. She's such a brilliant therapist. And you could feel the difference. I could physically feel the difference. Mentally, I could feel the difference there. And by that time, I wasn't bothered that I still had a long way to go on my journey. I didn't care because I felt the progress. And if someone had offered that to me before I'd started therapy, I would have ripped your arm off for it. Yeah, I'll take it now. So you don't care that you've got a long way to go because you can see where you started, where you are, and yeah, you might have a long way to go, but look at the progress and you can physically feel it, and suddenly your life's starting to change. So
That's so
that makes a
true.
massive.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Coming from a corporate background in sales, I was like so goal driven and results oriented. And also the culture I grew up with in my family system, competitive, if you're not trying hard enough, you're not torture, you're like not working, like this stuff is like ridiculous. But anyway, so I had a real problem, I should say challenge, becoming a therapist and being in the process. But, when I shifted what and I was also sort of had it, ingrained in my head that I was supposed to be happy. And that was like because I wasn't happy, and you can't ever be one emotional state. Now I realize that, but I thought there was a problem. But and I've redefined like my one of the large points of mine, like I really find great purpose in learning and growing each day, and like everything is an opportunity to learn about or to learn from and to grow. And so no matter what adversity, whatever adversity, whatever however horrific or non-horrific it is, like there's some opportunity to learn and grow, and it's never, ever wasted. It means something. It means something, and with that approach, like the shame, shame is creepy. We don't even know that we're carrying it. It's like very heavy and it's like sort of like invisible and like when we take on these new ways of being in the world and new perspectives, new glasses to see things through, it's like the shame goes away and it just feels so different. It feels lighter. And this idea of there being infinite possibility, like I used to be like, yeah, sure, whatever. But now I understand, no, there truly is, because it never ends. And because it never ends, and because it is a process, we don't have to make it a big deal or like, wish for it to be over.
Yeah, it's the old saying: if you're on that journey, you're never going to reach the destination, and that's fine because you're evolving and you're growing and you're learning and you're expanding in a positive way there as well. And for me, it's not a problem to never actually reach the end. It's just to keep on going for as long as you can and keep evolving and learning, because I'm massive into learning now. I'm constantly trying to evolve and learn and read books and just progress there as well. That's my fulfillment. That's what I've always enjoyed doing the most there as well. For yourself, what's next for you? What's the future for you? Because it looks like you got so much going on and there's so much that you want to do.
Well, I have um, committed to hosting a retreat, my first international retreat back at this place, Imaloa Institute, where I was in 2003 when this all started. Initially, I was like, do I go back to a place where I was already at? Because I'm like a Sagittarius and like to adventure and see different things. But, I really thought about like the whole experience and the support and just this luxurious jungle environment and everything. So I decided to sign the contract. So there's a lot of other changes going on personally, but I really am moving into this direction of hosting retreats. Like I've been training, I've been attending different ones. I've been like learning under people that really studying under people that really know what they're doing. And again, like sometimes I can hide behind certifications, but at a certain point in time, like Nike, you just have to do it. And so like that's what's next for me. And I'm really, really excited because as you're aware, Lee, like it's wonderful to help others on an individual basis. But there's so much going on right now. If there's a way that we can take it like you with the podcast from an individual to something more collective, and then that collective shares it with their collective. Like I really think it's important for us to have the courage to do our thing now and like, like share, help.
Yeah. Yeah. And same with me. I'm looking to try and expand out because I want to help stand on stage, tell my story, hopefully inspire people, similar circumstances to feel heard, to feel that there's something there for them, and with yourself there. I mean, if people who can get out half of what you got out of the retreat that you went to originally, it's going to make a massive difference to their lives there as well. So I think what you do and everything you're doing is just brilliant there. And it's so beneficial for so many people and future people that come your way, and also for yourself on your journey there as well. So I think that's brilliant.
Thank you. And you as well.
Yeah, it's all good. Slowly but surely we're getting there. I'll say slowly but surely. It seems to be quite happening fairly quickly there as well. But you always want it to be quicker, but it is what it is. But it's all good fun there. Alicia, it's been brilliant having you on the podcast. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I love what you do. Love your story. It's been so fascinating and interesting there. And again, I appreciate you coming on and thank you for taking the time out today.
Well, thank you for having me. This has really been like a wonderful experience. I'm so grateful. You really are great. It's really natural. Your clients must truly love you as your audience as well.
Thank you so much. You'll have to ask them. I can tell you that. Thank you.